trauma isn't what happens to you. It's what happens in your body because of what happened to you.
Welcome back to the show. Today's guest is Tammy Valicenti, an internationally recognized psychotherapist, TEDx speaker, and the creator of the Transformation Solution, a groundbreaking trauma recovery method that has been described as psychotherapy on steroids because it's that good. With over 25 years of experience, Tammy combines EMDR, internal family systems, or IFS, and other cutting-edge approaches to help people move from pain to peace faster than they ever thought possible. She's here today to talk to us about how we can reconnect with our bodies, redefine success from the inside out, and how to heal in safe and soulful spaces. This is a conversation you do not want to miss. So let's dive in. Tammy, it's so great to have you here. I have to say that I have been following your work for a while now. Your TEDx talk, your powerful conversations with Gabby Bernstein and Colette Baron-Reed, and it is really just such a gift to have you here today. So thank you and welcome.
I'm truly honored. I'm so excited for this conversation. Thank you.
Before we get into your method and all the incredible work that you are doing, can you take us back a bit and tell us what drew you personally to trauma healing and just what keeps you so passionate about your work?
Yeah, great question. I didn't know I was leading my professional life and personal life in this direction. I am a trauma survivor myself. I was raised by an alcoholic, also a survivor of trauma. My father was in the Vietnam War and is also a survivor of childhood trauma before that. So I was really steeped in it probably before birth. And I was called from a very young age to be a therapist. I wanted to be a child therapist, and I didn't know why. I didn't know where it was going to lead me. But after graduate school, I wanted to be working with women with women's issues. So I ended up working at a rape trauma program where I was trained almost 30 years ago in EMDR, which was really a technique back then, which is a full-blown therapy now. So it's been a thread that's pulled me, and it's something I didn't even know was happening. And now looking back, it's so clear.
And I like that you said that, and because I think this is an important part where you said that you were pretty steeped into it even before birth.
Mhm.
And this is something that you talk about where the body holds on to trauma.
Mhm.
Can you talk a little bit more about that? Because I think that's something that a lot of people just don't even realize.
Yeah, so trauma's stored in the body. You might think about what happened to you, but the reactions and the sensations and the emotions are all happening on a physical level. And until that is processed through and connected to other experiences, it stays alive in the body. Like, for example, when I was working with a Vietnam vet, he said the last time I was in Vietnam was last night. I work with a rape survivor. The last time that she was assaulted was last night. In those nightmares and in those dreams, it's still happening to their bodies. And I would take it, as you alluded to, steps further back even. I mentioned my father is a trauma survivor. So it's not just that he had PTSD while he was raising me in that home I grew up in, but it's also the genetic material that gets passed down. Our genes, our mitochondria are different when we are traumatized and not healed. So that's probably, many generations before me.
Another thing that at least when talking with myself, honestly, and even people close to me, it seems like trauma often goes unrecognized. Like we don't even realize that we have experienced trauma until either much later on in life or we are having difficulties in some area of our life and we, either go to therapy and then we have to realize, oh, this may have been trauma that I'm dealing with that I didn't even realize at the time. I was just maybe survival mode, or maybe you don't think about it, or you try to suppress it and you think that you've dealt with it.
Mhm.
And so we don't even realize that we have trauma. So can you talk a little bit about how trauma quietly shapes our identity, our choices, our physical health,
Mhm.
all of those things?
Yeah. Great question. There's so much there to say. I think, what you're implying in some way is that the big T traumas are obvious, right? Car crashes,
Mhm.
war, rape, all of those things are obvious. But then there's many of us who may not have experienced any of those things who go into therapy and like, oh, well, I don't have trauma. There's so much more that other people have experienced. And through that minimization, we lose the opportunity to really see how some experiences have shaped us. Like, like
Mhm.
for me, growing up in a home with an active alcoholic, some people might not call that trauma, but it does shape, as you mentioned, my nervous system, my view of the world, whether I feel safe in my body, whether I believe the world is safe, whether my nervous system is regulated, all those things. And I mean, as you know, we pretzel ourselves to keep ourselves safe. For
Yes.
example, like I always believed I was a shy person. I was deeply uncomfortable in public and with other people, had my head down a lot, and, "Oh, I'm just a shy person." No, that was a way of protection. I became
Mm.
very still and kind of, closed in on myself as a way of protection. I'm not shy. You're
Right.
probably experiencing that. But through my healing, I realized, oh, there's this gregarious extrovert in there. And when she's not
Mhm.
working so hard to survive, and I can really lead from my place of self, I mean, here she is.
Yeah.
Yeah. Have you had that experience too of not really?
I definitely have. I definitely have. And it was sort of similar, I always tell the story of, I didn't smile for the longest time because when I was young, was laughing. I remember vividly, I was laughing and I was sitting outside with my mother and she just looked at me and she goes, "Oh, your teeth. You really shouldn't.
Oh.
We need to get that fixed."
Mhm.
And so I went around for years and I would cover my mouth when I smiled or when I laughed and everyone thought I was shy or bashful and that really wasn't it. I love to laugh. I you know,
Yeah.
I'm a very usually happy like a lucky person. I like silliness and but it took me a very long time to get over even just being self-conscious of it to where I fully could show up and be myself and not feel like I had to hide certain parts of me in any type of interaction. So,
Right, that change can be
wholeheartedly.
so
Yes.
impactful, and
Yes.
until we work through that, can shape our lives.
But, I think sometimes, it does help, like you said, it shapes a lot of who we are, and I think once I knew enough to deal with that
Mhm,
and how to overcome that, and yes, it's taken therapy and then a lot of things,
mhm.
it becomes a part of your story, but it no longer becomes your whole identity.
I agree. I mean, in all of those experiences, they're invitations and opportunities for change.
Mhm.
Mhm,
Absolutely.
yeah.
Why do you think that it is that I'm gonna actually preface this question a little bit because I talk a lot about energy
Mhm,
and how our thoughts are energy, our feelings are energy. And so when we don't have the space to explore, or an outlet for our energy or for our thoughts or feelings, we keep a lot of negative energy built in and how it affects the bodies. But can you tell us in your terms why do you think the body is such a powerful gateway in the trauma recovery process?
mm. Like, as I mentioned before, trauma is stored in the body, so, really, the only way to transform and shift that is through the body, and, I think one of the reasons why, it's such a novel idea to us Western thinkers being the operative word is, most of us are going through our lives from our necks up, right? We're trying to analyze our way out and figure it all out when there's an entire being that exists beyond our thoughts. And I think the whole point here is that we have probably, tens of thousands of opportunities a day to start to shift that from dis-ease or discomfort to a release, to freedom, to flow. Like, for example, do we breathe, I don't know, tens of thousands of times a day? Just taking a deep breath, right? And then you've shifted your nervous system in that instant. When you have a sensation in your body or an emotion that comes up, and emotions are energy. We have those moments just to be really curious about the sensation or about the emotion and, face it, say hello to it. I feel you. I hear you. What do you need from me? What's your experience? What do you want me to know? And so all of those tens of thousands of opportunities, if we take them, we can shift what's happening in our bodies and then shift that trauma from pain to freedom.
Absolutely. And I love that you mentioned the nervous system. That's something I talk about a lot.
Uh-huh.
And even just that breath work, of even trying to just in the moment, taking a deep breath,
Mhm.
calming yourself.
Mhm.
One of the things I want to talk to you about is, and this is also something you touched on in your TED Talk, is that a lot of people associate therapy with these long, drawn out talking conversations.
Mhm.
Um, and when you created your transformation solution, which has been dubbed the psychotherapy on steroids, can you tell us what makes the transformation solution different than your typical therapy session?
Yeah, so it's, well, first, it's a lot faster and a lot deeper more
Mhm.
quickly. When you say long drawn out, I'm like, "No, thank you." I don't want people seeing me for months and years and this dependency. I'm just not interested, and, it really came from me not being interested in doing that myself. I was in
Mhm.
my own therapy talking about it and I understand it and so frustrated that nothing was shifting. So, through
Mhm.
really learning the EMDR protocol, like I said, decades ago, and then kind of zhuzhing it up myself with some parts work, which is now called IFS, it's really fast and transformative. So the
Mhm.
way I see it is I'm simply the guide. I'm your guide back to your body. I'm your guide back home. Everything you need is inside of you, and I know I'm preaching to the choir. I know you know this. I know you do this work in ways as well, and so the session looks different and it feels different. I really wanna spend very minimal time on background information, and then I wanna get right to it.
Mhm.
Where's the invitation? What is so, bothersome to you that you wanna transform it, and what does it look like when we're done? I want our eye on the prize and I want to get down to it and shift it as soon as possible. So, 1 to 3 sessions, 3 max, you're really going to feel a difference and a shift. I just ended with someone today. I think we did 4, maybe 5 sessions, and she's in flow. She's feeling really great. So, that's my goal, to get you back out there and feeling good.
So amazing. That's so amazing. And to me, I think that's so incredible. I think it's groundbreaking. I've heard so many people where they're like, it takes a lot of courage, one, for a lot of people to go to therapy. And then when they get into therapy, I just feel like we're sitting there talking, like nothing's really happening. I don't feel anything. And so
Mhm,
I think that this is just a game changer. And I absolutely love that about your transformation solution.
mhm,
For those who are unfamiliar,
mhm.
with EMDR and IFS, can you explain a little bit about, or just break them down, about how those work together to address trauma?
Excellent. So, EMDR stands for eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. I just had someone the other day ask me if we were doing it because we weren't doing eye movements. And in fact, most of the time we don't use eye movements anymore. So, what Dr. Francine Shapiro discovered over 30 years ago is that when she moved her eyes back and forth and thought about something disturbing, it became less disturbing. So, she got curious about it
Mm,
and developed EMDR protocol out of that. Since then, they later discovered, and we now know it's any bilateral stimulation. So, tones in your ears back and forth, or music in your ears back and forth, tapping back and forth, vibration. You get the idea. It just has to be bilateral,
mhm,
one side of the body to the other. So basically, EMDR is thinking about something that's disturbing or feeling something that's disturbing and integrating the bilateral stimulation with it. Now, there's a lot more to it, but that's kind of the basic gist. And what it does is
mhm,
it really allows you to energetically let some of that stored energy out from trauma. But
mhm,
also with the bilateral stimulation, you're connecting different size, different hemispheres of the brain and different memories that were not accessible at the time because trauma is not stored like typical memory. It's not connected to other neural pathways. And through the bilateral
mhm,
stimulation, connecting it to other neural pathways, you then ground it. And then you have access to other things like agency, safety, the things that weren't available to you when that trauma happened. And then
Yeah.
IFS, internal family systems therapy, developed by Dick Schwartz a few years back. And he was working with folks with eating disorders, and he was a family systems therapist. And he was frustrated by the lack of progress as well. But he noticed that in his patients, they were saying, well, I binged last night, but a part of me didn't want to binge, or a part of me was watching that. He got curious about that
Mhm.
and kind of flipped it internal. And he really sees humans as a whole, like a lot of different parts. A lot of times he'll begin his trainings by asking how many of us have multiple personality disorder. I now know to raise my hand and say, yes, I have lots of parts. But the real gist of it is that we have a core self that we were born with. It's real spirit, divine, aligned, God, call it what you will, in your language and your beliefs. And that life happens to us and kind of piles on different experiences, different things that we start to understand, maybe I shouldn't smile, those sorts of things.
Mhm.
And right. And then by working with these various parts and healing them, they step back a little bit and allow more self energy to come out. And that's when we are in flow and in peace and in ease.
I think that it is just very powerful. For those who are listening who are may not aware, would you be open to sharing a story without breaching confidentiality, of course,
Yep.
of someone who experienced a significant shift in a short time using this approach, just so they can understand?
Yeah, absolutely. I think I might share this a little bit on my TED Talk, and this is one that really struck me, and I learned so much about the process even further. And I want to highlight it because it really shows how not only we relieve the symptoms of trauma, but we also change the memory. I really wanted to call the TED Talk "Time Travel and Trauma Recovery." But, today
Mm,
wouldn't have that. It's really like a sense of going back in time and transforming in a way that that trauma didn't happen and it happened in a different way. So, for example, I worked with a woman who had been assaulted, many years prior. And when we focused on that trauma with EMDR, she at one point went back to the apartment where it happened, and she said to me, "I just pushed him off. That's not how the story really went."
mhm.
But in this session, she said, "I pushed him off of me and I ran out of the apartment." Her memory is that this assault really did happen, but with the redoing, with the processing, what remains in her nervous system is not that at all. What remains in her nervous system is she pushed him off and got out of that apartment. So she's got agency, she feels safe,
Mhm.
she has power. You can see how after, I don't know, was that 2 or 3 sessions? I'd have to look back, but after that very short period of time, she had access to self. She pushed that fear and processed that fear away and healed that, and what was left was real self.
That's an amazing story. That's a very powerful story.
Yeah.
Um, I know many women that have similar trauma, so that is a perfect story to share because I think reclaiming that sense of self, reclaiming that power is a game changer. And I hope that a lot of people listening are really taking that in, that that is possible to do, especially if they have that kind of experience.
Yeah.
So I know a lot of the people listening in the Core Happiness audience are women who are juggling many things or juggling many roles. They're doing all the right things or checking all the right boxes. Um, they look successful on paper, but they are feeling burnt out or lost inside. And I usually say, in following up on what you said, is like, we're still there. Who you are at your core is still there. Just sometimes it is buried under the roles, responsibilities, the stress, all of the things.
Mhm.
And a lot of times, especially with women being sometimes people pleasers or providers, it just we sacrifice ourselves, right? The last person we're serving up everybody else, and so the last person we think about is ourselves.
True.
And because of that, we can often get buried. But I'm curious from your standpoint, Why do you think that is? Why do you think that that is that so many women feel successful on paper, but we are really burnt out, or we feel like we've lost ourselves?
Yeah, I mean, I can speak from my own experience, and so I imagine that others have the same experience too. Is that I think about myself, back in the day, I was in my early 20s, living in New York City, and I was living the life I thought I was supposed to. I was
Mm,
emulating the drive, the push, the do it all and look good doing it thing,
mhm,
without taking a moment to say, well, what do I really want? What do I want it to
mhm,
feel like? I know the work that I do in the world is very much, we start with how do you want to feel? What does it feel like in your body to live that authentic life that you want to be living? You know? So I think a lot of it is like you mentioned, the expectation of roles of what we see around us and what people expect and want from us as women in this culture. And yeah, I think you're right. It doesn't serve most of us. So I don't know how we shedding those expectations and those roles, like for you, like you said, coming back to the core, coming back to who
mhm,
you really are. Maybe it's a tiny voice, maybe it's an inkling of I am so effing exhausted. I don't do this anymore. What is she telling you? And maybe that's scary to turn to, right? Because well, if I listen
mhm,
to her, I might have to change my whole life. That's terrifying.
mhm,
But what if we just sat with her and got curious and maybe she had some wisdom there. It doesn't mean we have to, like, run and do it all at once, but maybe we just get a clue for a moment. I think those
yeah,
places are great places to start. A lot of times I think it's also, stress and anxiety and I can't sleep and, showing up in all those ways. And what if we just got
yeah.
curious about some of those one at a time?
Absolutely love that. I know for myself, it was very much what you said. Like it's you living the life that you think you're supposed to be living, living the life that feels right based on society and expectations. And I know I spent 20 years in a career in film and television, and on paper, it looked perfect. I mean, I would have people say to me, like, gosh, you have such an amazing career. You have the perfect life. You get to travel, you get to work with these actors and directors
Mhm.
but I think I was constantly burnt out and I always thought this is so strange. Nobody else seems to be nearly as spent as I feel.
Mm.
And it took a moment where I really had to come to terms with what do I want?
Yeah.
What do I want and how is that manifesting? And then how am I also not manifesting it, right?
Yeah.
And for me, it ended up being that I was doing and a lot of this I think also comes from trauma from my childhood and how I was raised and what my parents instilled in me, all those conditional beliefs, which turn into limiting beliefs. And so that's what I followed. And I did exactly what I was supposed to do based on what my parents had told me. But what I really wanted to do, what mattered to me, wasn't showing up in my life at all. And then that was my disconnect.
Mhm.
So it was kind of having to come back to myself and then give myself the agency, the permission to honor that and not have to go with what I think is expected of me, which is hard to do. I mean, I think a lot of people maybe can relate to that, but it's still you have well, that's hard to do because then it feels like I'm being selfish or it feels like I'm
Right.
failing in some way.
Right, right. I find sometimes the
Yeah.
hardest thing to do is even find what that is. If you ask some people, "What do you want?" Sometimes they don't know, and the
Mhm.
answers are usually in how do you wanna feel? And I think sometimes that's easier to say, "I wanna feel this," instead of how I'm
Yeah.
feeling there, and then kinda literally feel your way into then what does that look like? What would you be doing in your life that would create that feeling inside of you, you know?
Mhm. Mhm.
Not an overnight process, is it? It wasn't for either one of us, and I'm sure anyone listening
Mhm.
that's in that process along the way. It does take some time. And then you find yourself later on saying, "I actually don't care what people think." Right? I'm doing
That's so
different. I
true.
know it's not typical, but I don't care.
And unfortunately, that happens once you kinda hit that road, right? You hit that and you're just like, "You know what? I don't even care. I don't I don't care what people think of
It
me."
feels too good. Yeah.
Too, that a lot of women, especially the clients that I work with, seem to go into the state of avoidance. And I think that state of avoidance often shows up as overfunctioning.
Mhm.
It's I'm going to keep myself busy. I'm going to keep myself almost distracted from my feelings and what I want. So I don't have to answer that question. I don't have to spend the time of undoing because that feels uncertain and that feels scary. So I'm wondering if you could speak a little bit to the patterns of overfunctioning and how that keeps people from healing.
Mhm. You alluded to it, right off the bat, and the overfunctioning is moving, 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 doing, 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 and you can't feel anything.
Mhm,
At that point, I'm not even in my body, right? Never mind not feeling emotions, but not feeling my body. And I imagine as I see in my practice that you see that as a lot of dis-ease, both emotionally and physically. So that shows up, high blood pressure and over medicating with drugs and alcohol. It'll show up as any of the DSM diagnoses, all the things.
yeah.
And I think also, as you alluded to, if you look back at our childhoods, yours, mine, and many others, that overfunctioning comes as a response to trauma and actually a healthy response to begin with, right? And so I
Mhm,
knew as a child, or I learned as a child, if I overachieve, if I become uber independent, then I don't have to rely on you, which is actually a good
mhm,
thing because you're not reliable. That's going to get me
mhm,
out of here,
mhm,
right? And if I don't need anyone, then I'm safe. So I don't, for me personally, I don't want to get rid of all of those parts of me. They're really important, but I do want to ask them to step back. I do want to heal them a little bit so that they can relax. So I don't have to live in
mhm.
that, like, you know, shoulders up to my ears and like exhaustion and all of that. So we go back to the young part that did all those things to survive. Love her up. Let her know we get it,
Yeah,
How about some compassion? And then through that, she can relax a little bit, and guess what? She'll go do what she usually does and wants to do, which is to play. She doesn't wanna be working that hard. She wants to go have some joy, get an ice cream, hang out with her friends, and then let me take
yeah.
care of it.
You actually have talked about radical self-trust before,
Mhm.
and I absolutely love this, but for our audience, can you tell us what you mean by radical self-trust, and what is an example of what it looks like in daily life?
Mm. Radical self-trust, the absolute knowing that no matter what, I'm okay. And and I don't mean everything's okay. I just went through a few months of hell last year with family illnesses and whatnot, and it was not okay. But I will tell you what, that I found the opportunities and the grace through that. And that I feel like really the goal in life and the goal in therapy and the goal in coaching sessions and all of that is that even when everything's not okay, that I'm okay. And that's the radical self-trust, and I think beyond that, it goes I mean, it's really trust. Trust in my higher power, trust in the universe, because self is that. There's not a lot of distinction because I am nature, I am God, I am divine. So, yeah, self-trust. There's another thing I wanna mention too that I keep hearing a lot of the buzzwords of, like, that, the self-abandonment. I don't buy into the self-abandonment. I hear that a lot, and it feels so blamey for me? I wanna maybe abolish that term or something. I'm not sure what I wanna do with that term, but I really see it as in those moments where people are labeling that self-abandonment, those are really moments when we are in survival mode, and there's a part of us that's working really hard to take care of ourselves. Maybe it's something that came out of childhood, usually, that's not working so great in the present, but let's applaud ourselves for working hard, not blame ourselves for abandoning? And I think that's linked to self-trust.
And I will say, I think I don't know, I know myself, and I know even women in my family have definitely had that where it's like, I don't know who I can trust, I'll trust myself, I will rely only on myself, and then that creates that sense of being the strong one,
Mm.
being the one who always has it together, and you almost kind of manifest the life also of, well, I don't have to worry about her, she's good and she's got it, but I think a lot of the radical self-trust, like you're saying, is when you have that comfort and you have that trust and you know that you are divine, you are an extension of the universe, you are an extension of the energies that we're all connected in a way. Like, I think that also allows you to sort of put down the shield sometimes
Yeah.
and to know when it's okay to be vulnerable. Yes, you can be strong. Yes, you can hold it all together and you know that you've got your back, but it's also okay
Mhm.
to undo some of that conditioning and to say, you know what? Yes, I've got my back, but I also need support right now, or things are not okay. And that's okay because I know I can reach out to whoever and have support. Like I think that's part of it too, is knowing when you do need that extra support and being okay with reaching out. Cause I think a
Yeah.
lot of times it's I have to be strong.
Mhm.
Nobody expects me to reach out to them, or people are always reaching out to me as the strong one. So I can't then reach out to them. And so there's that misconception I see a lot too is,
Mhm.
well, if people are reaching out to me, then I have to be the one that people go to, which means I then don't have anyone to go to. And I have to constantly be strong. I have to carry not just myself, but I've got to carry other people. And so I think that's part of it is knowing when you do need a type of release or you do need support or you do need a community, that is quite all right to put down the shield sometimes and say, "Hey, look, I could use some extra support here too." I think that goes at least in my mind, that kind of goes with the radical self-trust is trusting yourself to know what you need also.
Yes, thank you for that reminder also to be vulnerable. And
Mhm.
I think a lot of us, and I know I've been guilty of this too, of not wanting to reach out to people. I don't wanna be a burden. I don't wanna, you know, stress them out or anything, but really we're not giving by not reaching out, we're not giving them the opportunity to show up for us, and that's a gift for them in
Mhm.
a lot of ways. That emotional connection, that intimacy, we're denying them by not reaching out.
When we talk about this level of conditioning,
Mhm.
and like I said before, a lot of times the way we grow up, what we learn based on many different people in our lives can create our reality, but it also can create some limiting beliefs. And so I'm curious with your clients, are there common themes that clients have to unlearn?
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, I think it's at the core of those, irrational negative beliefs or those irrational schemas that we've taken on in childhood to help us survive. The negative beliefs of "I'm not worthy, I'm not good enough, I'm not lovable," and knowing that these are universal negative beliefs, we're not alone in it, and that we took them on, like I said, to survive because to believe that the truth that our parents weren't capable is to believe that we're not going to be cared for, which is to believe we're at high risk for not surviving. We can't go there. So I think that we've taken those on as a way of surviving and to stay curious about those and to know that a lot of times, in some work that they're not going to go away entirely and they pop up from time to time, but to know that that's an opportunity. And I think that those are the overarching limiting beliefs, and you can even hear in the "I'm not worthy." I mean, that's connected to so much. I'm not worthy to the
So much.
partner who's going to love me deeply. I'm not worthy of that 6 or 7-figure salary. I mean, worth money's,
Mm,
as you know.
mhm.
Mm.
I'm not worthy of happiness. Like sometimes it's just, I'm not worthy of being happy.
Right, 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 exactly.
So if someone notices that they're stuck in, let's say it's the overachieving or the people pleasing,
Mhm.
um, is there a small way that they can begin to shift back into alignment without, having to blow their entire life up?
Yeah, really simple, and this is true for anything. You can take a moment while you're driving or on the subway or before you go to sleep. It doesn't have to be like, "I'm gonna sit in a meditation cushion and do this for an hour," but you can take a moment and say, "Hello, I see that you're doing this," or the part of you that might be working a little too hard. Some questions to ask that part is, "What will you have me know? What's your story? What do you need to show me?" And just in those moments of connection and asking those questions, already you're going to feel a shift in your body. It can be subtle or it can be really big. I've seen people just tap in to a part, and a lot of emotion comes up. These parts haven't been connected with maybe ever or in decades, and to be connected with self in those moments, to be seen, to be heard, can be very powerful.
One of the things that I'm wondering too is I love that you've talked about essentially journaling and those journal prompts and
Mhm.
reflective questions.
Mhm.
Do you feel that those are the beginning steps to also that mindset shift that somebody needs to essentially offer themselves or at least prepare themselves for an inner journey?
Yeah, I do. I really see that as a way of beginning to know self, to know these different parts with
Mm.
reverence and with curiosity. Just that in and of itself, without the judgment, like, oh, could you stop, doing X, Y, and Z, or oh, this anxiety is just so awful. Like, go away, shove it down, deny it. If we took a breath and then spoke to these parts with these simple questions, we're really allowing the beginnings of self-love to show up, and that
Mhm.
changes everything.
Yeah.
Ultimately, the question we wanna get to after we've really sat with these parts and listened and been the container for change is, "What do you need from me?" And if
Mhm.
you wait for the answer, you may be surprised sometimes at what shows up. It may not be anything you'd thought of before.
Yeah.
Mhm. But it'll
I
be
love that.
exactly what the part needs and what your system needs. Yeah.
And I think sometimes community, and this is something I stress with my clients a lot, is that community can be very healing
Mhm.
also.
Mhm.
There used to be a saying where it's, your closest circle can sometimes reflect back to you who you are.
Mhm.
And when people are feeling lost or they're feeling unsure or uncertain, I think there is um, some strength in community.
Huge.
That actually leads me to you lead these retreats that are known to be very transformative,
Mm,
beyond inspirational.
thank you.
But can you talk a little bit about how doing this work in a group of women can be powerful?
Yeah, yeah. I think number 1, just being the container and holding that space for people is transformative first and foremost. Taking
Mhm.
space out of your,
Mhm.
go, go, go days can be transformative just in and of itself. I do co-lead my retreats with Ilana Siegel, who does, some really deep inquiry movement, which is incredible. um, Doing some of these sessions with the transformation solution and teaching the modality in dyads of women who come, and you'll be the facilitator and the receiver of the work, which is deeply transformative. I also do individual sessions with them, and then there's a lot of movement, really incredible nourishment with a private chef, and plenty of time for reflection, massage, sound bath, and other energy healings. It is I always leave these weekends so filled up.
I like that you said like the sound bath and all of that. All of this is very healing. Can you talk a little bit about the role that the nervous system plays in healing trauma and how the retreats help regulate and reset the nervous system?
Yeah, great one. In a way, it's not just like you said, it's not just a timeout, it's not just an inspirational time, but it's actually working on a cellular neurological system level. And
Mhm.
when it comes to nervous system regulation, those tools are really helpful. And you can take all of those tools out of the retreat with you. And what's underneath all of the things that you're trying to work through and regulate is being healed as well. So it's kind of it's a yes and. So the tools to regulate, and instead of just using the tools in your toolbox all the time, transforming, shifting, and healing what's underneath that need to regulate.
That's beautiful.
Yeah, thank
I think having that sacred space is incredibly important. And I like you said that it is more of a cellular level.
you. Mhm.
And I don't think a lot of people think about it in that way. If somebody's listening and they're like, that sounds amazing, but I just am not ready for a retreat or I'm not comfortable with groups or whatever their limitations
Mhm.
are there ways to create a sense of nervous system safety
Mhm.
or a sacred space within the daily life? Like, do you have any suggestions?
Oh, so many. And of course, only do what speaks to you. It's a walk in the woods. As we mentioned at the beginning of this talk, taking one deep breath. It can be like
Mhm.
what I do in the car sometimes, checking in with some parts and being curious and having those conversations. Cold plunging, massage. Um,
Mhm.
what's interesting too, the co-regulation, I think we mentioned this maybe before we got on air today, but I saw a moment of this experience so clearly when my daughter had to have surgery for something. And we were in the pre-op room together and she's hooked up to the monitors and everything. I can see her heart rate is going a mile a minute. And so I sat next to her, facing her, and put my hand on her leg, and I could see her heart rate go down a little bit. And then I asked her to put her hand on my heart, and I put my hand on her heart, and we looked into each other's eyes, right down to a normal heart rate. So I can't stress the co-regulation anymore. I mean, that happens on retreat for sure. That's happening in our conversation. That's happening with my kitty on my lap. So a connection with someone you deeply love or who is listening intensely or really understands and can hear you also regulates your nervous system. Sex, a long hug. They're all very nervous system regulating. So if you can infuse your days with those things that really allow you to take that breath, you'll feel better.
I love that everything you said are very practical things. A lot of times what I hear or the pushback that I'll hear is just, I don't have time. I don't have time in the day
Yeah.
to carve out any type of sacred space, let alone time for myself. But those are all very actionable. Like, even if it's, I always say this, even if it's 10 minutes during a lunch break to go walk outside in nature, like
Mhm.
something. It doesn't have to be long, but it's just a small amount of time that you can call sacred time just to reset the nervous system, take some deep breaths.
Mhm.
It's all you need sometimes. It doesn't have to be this full, drawn out 1 hour meditation.
No, it does not. We do not have to be super meditators or anything. It could just take a minute in between sessions. Sometimes I'll close my eyes literally for 30 seconds. It's a beautiful reset. I
Yeah.
feel like intentionality has a lot to do with it as well. That intention
Mhm.
to care for self, that changes it.
Yeah. Is there a common misconception about trauma healing that you wish everyone understood?
I don't know if it's a misconception or not, but I think a lot of people will say, I don't have trauma. I wasn't traumatized, that it has to be a big T trauma. And maybe that is a misconception. I think maybe that is. That just living in the culture we're living in shifts and changes our nervous systems in ways that looks like trauma. And so I wanna say, even if you haven't dealt with or survived a big T trauma, that perhaps what you're struggling with, panic attacks or overachieving or something, perhaps that has roots in something that you don't see as trauma. And I think I implore you not to minimize anything that's happened to you or any of your experiences because someone else has experienced something that seems to be more traumatic or more difficult. We all have our stories, and if we minimize those in ourselves, we lose the opportunity to heal it. Own it and heal it. And if you're not sure how, you said connect and ask for help.
Mhm. I love that you brought up little T traumas because
Mhm.
I think that is a big misconception is that if it's not a big T trauma, then it's not trauma. And do you feel that little T traumas have the same impact in terms of mental health, physical health as a big T?
Absolutely, 100%, because trauma is not what happened to you. It's what happens in your body because of what happened to you. So, I just wanna say that one more time. Trauma isn't what happens to you. It's what happens in your body because of what happened to you. So, what happens to you, maybe you're in a car crash, after this show, and, and you're fine. Maybe I'm in a car crash after this show, and I can't sleep, and I'm, losing weight, and so my point is that trauma is also so individualized. So what might be so horrific and difficult for you, I'm like, another day in the life, and I'm all good. So it really has a lot to do with, what were our intergenerational experiences. What is my biology? What am I bringing to the table? What do you bring to the table? So it's not a one size fits all. Yes, absolutely, it's an impact on the nervous system as big T traumas. Thank you for that question. That was so important.
Yeah, I mean, because I think that's the one thing that I hear. It's like, well, this is not trauma because it's not this big thing that most people would deal with and call trauma.
Mhm,
And therefore, I don't really need help. I don't need to, talk to anyone.
mhm,
It's just everyone deals with things like this. It's not a big thing. And I love that you said that. It's not what happens to you. It's your body response. It's the physiological response of all the things that we can't even see or understand happening inside of us
yes.
that we need to take into account. And I like before where you said disease, like disease can be that I'm at ease,
Yeah.
but it also could be disease in terms of, like you said, the high blood pressure, all of these things.
Mhm, mhm,
So I think that's just such an important part that I want people to understand
yeah,
is that if it's affecting you in any type of way,
mhm.
little t, big T, then it's trauma and then it can be dealt with.
Absolutely, and the antidote to all of this, as you saw in the example with my daughter, is connection.
Oh, yes. Yes. And on that note, I actually want to go back for a second to the retreats because I know sometimes when people are thinking about retreats, they say, I'm a little nervous about showing up in a group setting, or, maybe they're scared of being judged or something like that.
Mhm,
So, what would you say to help them feel safe if that's a person who likes the idea of their retreat, but is just uncomfortable with group settings or
mhm.
kind of having that community support?
Yeah, I mean, in part, I would say trust your gut, trust your body. If group setting isn't right for you right now, great. Start
Hmm.
in an individual basis, whatever that looks like for you, whether it's working with
Hmm.
you, working with me, working with someone else. Um, start on that journey. If you're still a little curious, one of the things that Ilana and I are very fond of saying and living into is all parts are welcome. Literally all parts. So I think when you understand that any part that you might be cutting off or feel shameful about or anything, that's all welcome there, I think that can ease some of that. And the truth is that there are I would say almost every single woman who's showing up is feeling similarly, and everyone leaves wanting to continue to connect, and they do. We continue with groups. We have different offerings with sound baths or with breath work. And majority of the women, I would say 90% of the women stay connected.
I love that.
Yeah.
Thank you for that. I think a lot of people need to hear that,
Yeah.
especially because you are thinking about, I don't know, these people are strangers and this feels uncomfortable.
Yeah.
But I think another way to look at that is, yes, all parts of you are welcome. And
Mhm.
most people are feeling the exact same way as you.
Yes.
And that is actually something that can help with bonding
Mhm.
and can kind of help get over some of those uncomfortable feelings at first. So
Absolutely.
thank you for that.
Yes. We are all uncomfortable at the beginning, including me.
If someone is listening
Mhm.
and they are like, "You know what? This all sounds great, but I feel like I've tried this. I've tried walking in nature. I've tried journaling. I have tried talking to someone, and I tried everything, the
Mhm.
everything,
Mhm.
and I still don't feel whole. I still don't feel clear."
Yeah.
What would you say to them? What would you want them to know?
I want them to try again. Maybe not try the things that they've tried, but maybe try someone different. I can't tell you. I mean, I would say that's a majority of my practice. People show up in my space saying, "I've tried everything else. Like, why is this going to be different? I'm not sure, but I have the hope because someone said that you could help me."
Mm,
And I'm sure there's others like me that can say in those first 1 to 3 sessions, you will feel different. I was so, careful not to say that in my 20s and my 30s. In my 40s, I began to own that because it was true, and I wanted people to know that. And so I want people to know in those first couple of sessions with a therapist, if you're not feeling it, if it's not changing or shifting, move on. Don't stay there for months, you know? Find someone who you know and you can really feel in your body is helping you shift things. There's always hope.
beautiful.
Yeah.
Well, Tammy, your work is clearly making such a deep impact, and we will certainly be sharing links to all of your socials, your website, the TED Talk. But is there anything thing that you want to leave with listeners as we wrap up? Anything you would like to share or anything upcoming?
Well, we do have a retreat coming up November 9th to 11th in the Northeast, just I think about 2 hours north of the city. But more importantly, I do want to come back to this real core belief that you and I talked about in the beginning, and that is you have everything you need inside of you. And if you don't believe that now, if you step onto the path, at some point you will see that. Just keep following the light.
Beautiful.
Thank you.
Tammy, thank you so much. Again, such a gift to have you here. And I am so, so, so honored that you took the time.
I am honored. Thank you for this conversation. It was so enjoyable.
I thank you for joining me today. If you enjoyed this podcast, please feel free to rate it or leave a review. If you have any thoughts or questions, I would love to hear from you. You can email podcast@corehappiness.com. For show notes and additional resources, you can visit www.corehappiness.com. As always, please remember, never let anyone diminish your light. Until next time, sending you my love.